Hi everyone. Today we're going to be talking about the Hierophant. The Hierophant on the Tree of Life sits here between 2 and 4, or Hokmah, wisdom, and mercy, Chesed. The powers of wisdom are expansive, and so are the powers of number 4, mercy. Wisdom is knowing something and giving a piece of information or a guidance teaching, basically about eternal law. And people are always confused on why one is the crown and then it created wisdom first. And it's because essentially there can be no contraction, which is understanding to take in, without an expansive quality first. So wisdom has to do with the basically the powers of eternal law and cosmic law, and a sense of knowing something without really experiencing it first or hearing from somebody else. So if we kind of rewind a little bit, we can actually draw a connection between the high priestess and wisdom, because the high priestess is number 2 and she represents subconsciousness, and subconsciousness is the foundation of basically our universe. Our We subconsciously grew our bodies, and nature subconsciously developed humanity as a spiritual being without basically trying. So the patterns of life were already out there in the cosmos from spirit or the heavens, and our subconsciousness is representative of that. And as we go through the video, I'll explain more as we go. So the Hierophant sits in between wisdom and mercy. Now, mercy is, let's break it down. Mercy is to murk. Now, some of you gamers out there probably have heard, oh, I murked this guy in this one competitive game, blah, blah, blah. And so murk means to overpower, to overcome, to give and give and give. And wisdom also has the same quality, but mercy is at a lower octave than wisdom or Hokmah. So the planet Jupiter is actually assigned to mercy, and Jupiter has the same qualities as this fourth Sephira. So the Hebrew letter that actually sits in between Hokmah and Chesed is the nail. It's Vav. And Vav is one of the letters in the divine name. And it sits in between the two He's. Now, we can draw an infinite amount of connection between that, but it is a letter in the divine name. And Vav means the nail. So some Hermetic Kabbalists say that the path between wisdom and mercy, Vav, is actually the path that drops down into the creative world. So it's a path that connects the archetypal world into the creative world, and then creates the patterns, of formation for material reality to manifest. So we're gonna move on to this card. This just shows us a little bit more in detail what's actually happening with the theoretical or the technical side of the Hierophant. So here we have the path, and the color is assigned to orange, so the Hierophant is orange. And here we have the sign of Taurus. Taurus is ruled by Venus, and the moon is exalted in Taurus. Now, exaltation means that the planet feels at home in that sign. So Venus rules it. The overarching power is Venus, the planet Venus in Taurus. And then the exaltation is the moon. So we have both basically planets combined. And what happens is you get a synthesis of both of them, and it creates the sign. So Taurus is a combination between Venus and moon energy, which represents nature, beauty, a little bit of luxury. And with the powers of the moon, you basically get pattern, periodicity, all of the hermetic laws. You get a reflection of the light. Okay, you get the light and the dark. So, which makes sense for the Hierophant. All right, and then here is the letter Vav. Okay. Oh, and one last detail. This is the abysmal line between the archetypal world and the creative world. So now let's move on to the tarot, the actual tarot. And we will just go over a couple of details as usual, and then we will move on. So this is the Hierophant, and Hierophants bring people to spirituality. They show them the spiritual way. And anybody can be a Hierophant. So a guru can be a Hierophant, a priest can be a Hierophant, a rabbi can be a Hierophant. A Hierophant is just the general name for someone that brings spirituality to others. Now, for a Hierophant to do that, they must know spirituality themselves. They must know their higher self, their higher consciousness themselves, and they must have a taste of it. Now, the Hierophant could be said that they awaken the spiritual energy within them. They awaken the Kundalini force in themselves and others. And ultimately, that is basically what the Hierophant is trying to achieve. So, we'll just look at these two figures here, okay? On the figure on the left, we have a person that has roses on their garment. And on the right, we have a person that has lilies on their garment. Now, if we rewind and we go back to the Magician card, we had roses representing desire, and we had lilies representing thought. Now, the Hierophant in this picture represents the higher self. So, these two figures are kneeling with their desires and their thought to their higher self. So, why would the person be kneeling that has desires and thought to their higher self? Because the higher self always knows the path. It always knows the way. The higher self decodes subconsciousness. So the subconscious foundation of our cosmos came from somewhere beyond our dimension, came from somewhere beyond our reality. And when we meditate or we pray, we are actually tapping into this subconscious patterning, and we are connecting to wisdom, okay? And we are connecting to multi-dimensional consciousness. And we get these messages through our subconsciousness. Okay. Now, once you've created that connection with subconsciousness, some people call it the voice, you will constantly be getting information. You will constantly be getting things that you know are true, but you don't necessarily know how you came to the conclusion. So to contact the voice or a higher self, or the channel that subconsciousness leads you to the portico, basically it leads you to the creation of our reality, and ultimately into the spiritual world or realm. We are creating a connection with our higher self. And once that happens, once we create a connection with the higher self, we've awakened the Kundalini energy, and we can actually become Hierophants ourselves. So that is what the tarot does. It's a pictorial key to awaken ourselves to these higher dimensions, to understanding what is happening, in our minds at a better and faster rate than we would realize on our own. So that's the Hierophant by A.E. Waite. Next, we'll look at the BOTA Hierophant. So here we have a different rendition. I personally enjoy this rendition a little bit better than A.E. Waite's. I like some A.E. Waite depictions better than Paul Foster Case's BOTA, but this one I actually really enjoy a lot better, and I'll point out the couple of details. I'm not going to explain them thoroughly, but just enough so you can get the gist of it. So here we have the person, or the monk that is wearing the roses, is reaching towards the lilies, and this is indicating that we must first give our desires to our thoughts and reason through our thoughts. And then once our thoughts have exhausted their reasoning skills, we then give ourselves to our higher self. And the Hierophant here represents the higher self in its most complete form, communicating with the divine. Okay. Another detail I'd like to point out is actually the way that his hand is pointed inward, and the two fingers that he has up. Now, there are many different ideas of what these two fingers mean. I personally think that they mean silence, but not only that, when we silence our mind, we can better access the subconscious flow of our cosmos that came from the multidimensional, spiritual powers. Okay. And it lines up really well actually with the High Priestess, because the High Priestess is number 2. The High Priestess is the subconscious mental stuff that created life here on Earth. So, the number 2, he's holding up the number 2, and he is indicating it is through silence and the High Priestess that we come to our realization of spirit, of our higher self. Okay? So next we're going to look at the Thompson Lang Tarot. And here we have a pretty basic Hierophant. The color scheme in this deck is a bit different than the conventional Golden Dawn ascendants that we encounter via tarot. And you can see the 2. You can also see the blue undergarment indicating the powers of the High Priestess. Now we'll look at the Manly P. Hall Hierophant. And here we don't really have much detail. The monks don't have any designs or anything like that. And to me, this Hierophant Well, actually, in this deck, it's called Le Pape, which is the Pope. So Manly P. Hall kind of stuck with more of a conventional tarot layout, and he added French instead of English. Okay. Oh, and we can see the duality of the pillars here. Now, in the first two cards or first three cards, there was not any duality. So the pillars also represent a connection to the High Priestess. So the High Priestess and the Hierophant are tied up with each other in so many ways, and actually the High Priestess could be considered the feminine form of the Hierophant. She is kind of like the concubine of the Magician and the Hierophant. So yeah, to me, this figure looks very feminine. But Manly P. Hall never wrote a book on his tarot deck. He kind of left it to us to, interpret, which is beautiful and also a difficult thing at the same time. So yeah, the Hierophant by Manly P. Hall, or the Pope. In this case, it's the Pope. Okay, now we're going to move on to Tarot de Marseille. And here we have one of the more, this is an older depiction of the Hierophant. We have the Pope, okay? And I'm just going to point out one detail. The hand. It's coming out of nowhere. And I think this is where Paul Foster Case got the inspiration to actually draw a hand on his deck. So the more decks you look at and the more decks you converse with, you'll start to see similarities. And it's really important to actually look at historical decks too, to see where the adepts before us got their ideas and got their inspiration from. So as always, as we move through the series, we're going to deviate more and more from the conventional modern day decks. Well, actually, I take that back. Here, we're going to deviate from the Rider-Waite deck, because that's the main one. And so Aleister Crowley, as he liked things different, so he made his own tarot deck. And so this is the Aleister Crowley Hierophant, and he labeled the Hierophant to Vav and Taurus, so he didn't deviate from that at all. And up here we kind of have an unraveled Ouroboros. Okay. What I do want to point out here is the elephants. So sometimes in astrology, the elephants are associated with Taurus energy. Okay. So elephants are associated with Taurian energy. And yeah, I mean, this is the Aleister Crowley Hierophant. Okay. Last but not least, we have the Godfrey Dawson New Hermetic Tarot. And here we have the Hierophant actually placing a his staff into a pillar. And it's almost like the Hierophant is placing that into the pillar and it's sending it upward into the powers of, the portico. We have 3 dots here, and then we have 1, which is ultimately the magician, or the one thing that rules, the one life force that, is constantly beating forward, or, pushing things forward in our reality. So it very esoteric card, very interesting. And yeah, that's the Godfrey Dawson New Hermetic Tarot. Okay, I hope everybody enjoyed the video, and so long for now.